Welcome to Al Bernstein Unplugged on Boxing. In a 40-year Hall of Fame career, Al has chronicled some of the greatest moments in boxing history. On this podcast, you get to hear him expand on those memories and talk about the current news in the sport of boxing. You also hear Al interview some of the biggest names in the sport. Here's Al Bernstein Unplugged.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode. On this one, we have double the pleasure because we have an interview that we're going to be doing with Vinnie Pazienza, former two-division world champion, a colorful, flamboyant, and oftentimes endearing guy, though that doesn't always take center stage. And then we also have an interview with the legendary sportscaster Tim Ryan, who called over 300 world championship fights and covered 10 Olympic Games, covering many sports. And of course, he was a multi-sport sportcaster, but made his mark doing boxing, to be sure. And that's one of the main reasons we have him on the show here on this episode. And of course, we're going to take some of your questions and chat a little bit about boxing. And to do all that, let me bring in my co-host, Mr. Trip Mitchell. Trip, hello there.
Hey, Al, how are you? Congratulations. The Al Bernstein bounce took effect on the fight, the big top-ranked fight out of Vegas. Good job.
Yeah, we had Teofimo Lopez on our show, and by being on my show, clearly it inspired him to perform well. And he beat Vasily Lomachenko. It was an amazing performance by Teofimo Lopez. I know many people have kind of laid some of it at the doorstep of Vasily Lomachenko being inactive for 14 months leading up to the fight. Also, Lomachenko being a little inactive in the fight in those initial rounds and not getting off offensively. But some of that was due to Teofimo Lopez and the power that he brought to the game. And it was a very intriguing fight. It wasn't a barn burner, but it had a lot of exciting moments. And Lopez was able to do something that's pretty tough to beat one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world today, Vasily Lomachenko. You know, he did it, I thought, by making sure that he used his jab and mixed in those terrific uppercuts, also landed some powerful right hands. And one of the things that is interesting about the fight is Lopez is a monstrous puncher at 135. We saw that against Richard Comey. He was able to land big punches on some occasions, but Lomachenko was able to take them. So it was a very good performance for him. Lomachenko did come back and have great moments in the latter portion of the fight, but it just wasn't quite enough.
Well, we've got a couple of questions pursuant to that fight, and why don't we get after them?
Yeah, let's do it.
So when you're watching the fight, Bradley came out. By the way, Andre Ward did a great job, too, and a good friend of the show. I thought acquitted himself very well. But Bradley came out and said Lopez is going to win this thing by a knockout. Is it rare to have a color analyst come out and be so assertive on their picks?
Yeah, that's referring to Tim Bradley, who we also had as a guest on this show, and Tim's a great guy. It gets back to one of a main central theme of sportscasting these days, do you or don't you? In many sports, we have people broadcasting sporting events and actually predicting who will win. Now, it's not often done on the telecast, as was the case here. As you know, I have kind of a personal rule that if I'm going to broadcast a boxing match or any sporting event I've ever broadcast, I definitely don't feel I want to predict who's going to win. I would rather have people feel that I'm watching that event as they are and without any preconceived notions, though we all, of course, have them. But, the idea is to not make them front and center. Tim didn't feel that was the case. He was happy to make a prediction. That's not my general rule of thumb. And in general, I'm not in favor of doing it. But Tim's kind of carving out a career in which he's very outspoken and very opinionated when he does the fights. And so I think in a way this was in keeping with the brand he's kind of creating, but for me, it's not what I do.
Yeah, and you, in your most recent book, you talked about the fact that announcers now are going for more controversy, a little bit different way of looking at things, and
yeah,
it's changed.
It did. It changed dramatically, and so I, and it's encouraged by producers and people doing television on the sport. So he's not an outlier in this regard. It's a different way of looking at things.
And Skip Bayless's accountant also is encouraging that.
Yeah, true. And his agent, who takes a percentage of the money that Skip Bayless makes.
And next question coming in. What about Loma going back to 130? Would that be a better weight for him?
Yeah, I think that question is a valid one. I, in fact, think that Vasily Lomachenko is probably better at weights below 135. He's an effective lightweight, and the loss to Lopez doesn't mean he can't beat other top lightweights out there, and has beaten top lightweights. But I think 130 is a great weight for him, and he can still make it easily. And down at that weight, Shakur Stevenson is down there, another what could be a huge fight. And he could fight the winner of Miguel Berchelt and Oscar Valdez, which is coming up in December. So there are fights down at 130 for Vasily Lomachenko. And, one of the things that, in boxing, we tend to overreact to things in sports in general. And even though Vasily Lomachenko lost that fight to Teofimo Lopez, it doesn't diminish the fact that he's a fantastic fighter. And that's why I'd like to see him go down and wait and fight some of these top fighters. I think it would be intriguing. Well, fighting at multi-weight divisions was something that our first guest certainly did. Vinnie Pazienza, while he was fought at junior lightweight, and then went all the way up to, I think, by the time he was done, he fought at 168, which was pretty extraordinary. And along the way, gave boxing fans lots of excitement. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. And we had it with my friend, Vinnie Pazienza. Vinnie, thank you for joining me here. This is one conversation I've looked forward to for quite a while.
Very good, Al. Whenever your name pops up, I think of my mom, and that's a good connection.
Your mom, Louise, was a wonderful, wonderful lady, and I really, really enjoyed knowing her. And she was a great fan of my broadcasting. She would always tell me nice things, and she made me feel good because I was still young in my career, and I needed all the positive strokes I could get.
Al, it's funny, but it's actually a game of luck, a life of luck. You just got to be lucky to have good parents. The only reason why I won one of those, maybe I wouldn't have won not one if I didn't have the great parents that I had. Really, I got blessed.
It's a good way to put it. It is true. Who we get born to and is a roll of the dice, isn't it? And having parents that are loving and supportive and will help you achieve your goals is something that not everybody does have. And when you have it, it's a blessing.
Yeah, I got really blessed in life. I got blessed. I look at it this way, Al. I got blessed. I won 50 pro fights. I got blessed. I won 5 different world titles. I got blessed. I came back from a broken neck. Yeah. I'm a blessed guy. That's why I'm here right now.
Yeah, you are for sure. And we're going to talk about a bunch of that. I wanted to ask you that when you were young, did you have the sense that you were destined to be a boxer, that was going to be the phrase that would be used to identify you?
1,000%. I fell in love with this guy when I was 5 years old, called Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Loved him. I created my life after that guy. I loved him.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting role model for sure. And you're not the first person. A number of boxers say that. They say it was so powerful, the images of him doing what he did. And of course, you created a terrific career. And the first really super big moment of that career happened in Rhode Island when you, in front of a packed house in your home area, when you fought Greg Haugen for the lightweight title. And you mentioned your mom. There's a great, on NBC Sports World, just before the fight is happening, when you did your walk-in and the crowd was such an emotional moment. They had this great shot of her dabbing away tears from her eyes. So for her, clearly, she felt the cathartic moment of that.
Wow.
What was that experience like for you?
Jeez, it was, you know, after when the announcer called me as the champion, I thought I found God.
Yeah.
I thought I found Jesus Christ. But then I found out, like, a couple of fights later, nah, I didn't find Jesus
Maybe
Christ.
you didn't. Well, for the moment you did anyway.
For the moment, it was unbelievable. My God, the first world title we ever win. And that's what I dreamed of my whole life since I was 5 years old.
Yeah, and to do it in that setting with such support from the people that you had grown up around had to be really, really spectacular. You know, you mentioned, moving on from that, you had a rivalry with Greg Haugen. It turned out to be a 3-fight rivalry, and the two of you, you know, I know both of you very well. Greg Haugen was actually a neighbor of mine in Las Vegas for a while, and he's a very feisty guy. You know, he can get under your skin a little bit, and you are a flamboyant competitor. The two of you made for an interesting combination.
He's a douche. Quite frankly, I don't like him, and I still don't.
You guys never got along.
No, because he's not a good guy, and I am a good guy.
There are people that, you know, there's no question Greg Haugen has left a trail behind him of some folks that are not too thrilled with him. Yeah. And I felt that it was kind of genuine antagonism between the two of you. But you ended up kind of getting the last laugh because you won 2 out of the 3 fights from him.
Absolutely. And
so
the last fight was a great fight for me. He barely hit me. I think he hit me with 2 shots the whole fight. You know, I danced around, and literally, Donald Trump was in the front row.
Oh,
you know,
interesting.
How nuts? How crazy is that?
Yeah, think about that. At that time, you probably never thought the president was sitting in the first row.
Imagine, Al, how nuts is that?
Yeah. We won't get into that.
Of course not.
Yeah,
I never argue with anybody about politics.
Yeah, no, it's too dangerous. More dangerous than getting in the ring, I think. And you, of course, fashioned after that a career that included a number of different championships. You had a moment that I want to ask you about that I wasn't even that aware of until I was doing some research for this interview, where you fought Roger Mayweather, and after the fight, you suffered probably some kind of dehydration or something physical that you really were worried. You literally were worried you were going to die at that point. Or at least that's what was reported. How much trouble were you in at that point?
Al, I was dead. I died for a moment. And, you know, I was sitting on, and I can remember this. I don't remember too many things. You know, after over 100 pro fights, yeah. 60 professional fights, thousands and millions of rounds of sparring, I'm lucky I'm as good as I am now.
No, you're good. You remember a lot.
But I remember I was laying on the bed and in the hospital, and my father was in the room with me. And I just remember, Al, I was going up and up through white, wow. not like white like my hat, vibrant white clouds. And I was just going up and up and up. And I said, everybody was at that fight because the main bout was Sugar Ray Leonard versus Donnie Lalonde. Remember?
Yes, I recall that fight. Yeah.
It's Sugar Ray Leonard, Donnie Lalonde. Everybody was there. I mean, Stallone was in the crowd. Yeah. Hugh Hefner, like everybody was there. And it was the first time I got dropped. Like Roger hit me. I was so I felt like it was a bad dream, the fight. and I was just so embarrassed. And after the fight, when they took me to the hospital because they had to pump me up with fluids, I was so dehydrated. I couldn't make 140.
You got through it, and no matter, and even with the scare, you
But
had.
I was laying on that bed. On that it wasn't a bed. It was a hard thing where they had the X-rays going on me. But I can remember just going off, say, you know what, Vinnie Paz, fuck it. You just lost. You got beat. You got dropped. You know what? Frig it. I'm out of here. And I felt myself going up and up. And my mother was very religious. I'm not very religious, but I was going up and up out through white, bright clouds, and it felt great. It felt great. And I literally said to myself, you know, I'm going. I feel like a douchebag. I got dropped by Mayweather. I'm out of here. This is it. It's over for me. And my father wasn't there because the Duvers never came with me anywhere to the hospital or anything. They were at the fight, made their money, and then screwed. So my father was in the room with me, and the nurse came in and said to my father, said, Mr. Pazienza, we're losing your son. Wow. He's only got one heartbeat every 7 to 8 seconds. And my father grabbed my shirt and he started shaking me violently out. And boom, I came back down. That was the only thing that I would be going. We wouldn't be talking right now.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
Amazing story.
Crazy and 1000% truth.
That is wild. Oh my gosh. Well, your story is about overcoming, and in that case, you overcame a near-death experience, and you had to overcome another terrible tragedy that happened to you, the car accident where you got a broken neck and a number of other very, very serious injuries. Concerns again about you literally getting through it. And yet, astonishingly, you were able to not only recover, but return to the boxing ring. During that time, what was it that made you feel like you had to not just recover, but had to actually box again?
Al, when something's in here, you do what you got to do to make anything happen. You know what I mean. When it's in here, it's just that, you know, it ain't going nowhere when it's in here.
Right.
And I got lucky. You know, I got lucky, and I worked hard. Blessed once again, blessed.
You worked extraordinarily hard, and very few people, I'm going to guess, thought you were going to get there. How much did people suggest to you this was not a good idea? How many people suggested that to you? A lot, I'm guessing.
Everybody except Kevin Rooney. Yeah, everybody except Kevin. Kevin was, you know, I was like this with Kevin. I loved Kevin. Kevin was such a great guy. Really, he was a great guy and a great trainer. You know, he was awesome with me.
Excellent trainer, and he supported you. And of course, a movie was made about Bleed for This, which is a terrific boxing movie. I was privileged to do a few voiceovers for it, to participate a little bit, and it was a wonderful movie that I thought really kind of gave people the idea of just what you had gone through. And I'm guessing it felt kind of cathartic to you and a good feeling to have that story told to another generation.
The movie was really good. You know, I can't say enough about it. I'm glad. I don't know how Miles Teller played me so well.
Unbelievable. He was fantastic, wasn't he?
Yeah. And I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. Good, real good guy. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. And the movie was, as we said, it chronicled your story, exceptionally well. And I found it interesting when the movie came out, talking to young boxing fans who were kind of aware of you but didn't know everything about you, and they would talk to me about the movie, and they'd say, you know, this it's just a, you know, an amazing story. So I'm guessing it won you an additional group of fans that you didn't even have.
You know, it's funny, Al, how life goes, and you know, I got a little bit screwed with the producers of the movie. They were supposed to put it in over 3,000 theaters. They put it in less than 100. Wow. Yeah, which, you know, which really made it suck, but it's okay. I got some big stuff going on now with a documentary that's going to be off the hook. The filming of it is incredible. I've seen like some of the footage, and I've been on TV since I was 18 years old, and I've never seen anything remotely close to this. It's awesome, and you'll see it. You'll see it. You'll hear about it shortly. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be out there.
That's great. When do you think it's going to be concluded to be?
It's going to be 2021.
Excellent. Well, we'll all look forward to it.
It's the footage they got now. I just can't even believe it, and it's my life, but I've never seen it done like this. It's crazy. Cool, really, really cool.
Isn't it interesting how, even though, as you point out, it's your life and you lived it, seeing it from a different angle gives you a different idea about it, doesn't it?
Yeah, most certainly. And every time I look, I shake my head and go, "What the fuck was I thinking?"
How did I do that?
but it worked out.
Pretty amazing. So you, in your boxing career, you had a couple other rivalries in addition to the Haugen. Of course, you had a rivalry with two other men, Dana Rosenblatt and Roberto Duran. Of course, you fought many other great champions, but those were two that you had rivalries with. If I gave you each of their names, give me your a 1 or 2 sentence description of them. Let's start with Dana Rosenblatt.
Did you say 2 words?
Well, a description, a short description of how you feel, of your impression of him.
Dana Rosenblatt, douche bag.
Did you say bad?
Douche bag.
Oh, okay. Oh, douchebag. Okay, you're not a fan of Dana's.
2 words.
All right, that's all right. We'll take that. So Dana's not your favorite. How about Roberto Duran? If you had to give me a description of him.
One of the greatest fighters of all time. He was amazing.
Okay.
You know, I fought him. He was 73, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
it was actually 43, but 73 will do. Yeah. I think he was getting ready to get his AARP card, but he still, amazingly, at 43, did have something left in the tank.
Al, when I tell you this freaking guy hit me harder than anybody by far my whole life. I mean, I fought the heavyweight champ of the world. I fought everybody, you know, and oh my God, when he hit, it was like a turn of that big ball, that big metal ball, boom, banging into your body, boom, banging every shot. It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. In the first round, I took the first shot and I went, in my mind, I went, no way, no way. You did not just hit me that hard. No way. And then he did it again. And I go, oh my God, how am I going to take 12 rounds of this shit?
Oh, that's crazy. Even at 43, that's pretty extraordinary. And watching those fights, while clearly he wasn't what he was before, there were spots in that fight where he did some really good work, and it was pretty interesting to be sure.
Tough guy, still a tough badass.
Yeah. What if you had to encapsulate what makes Vinnie Pazienza, what made him special in the ring? What were the qualities that you think you had that made you able to win those championships and do what you did?
A lot of hard work. I never stopped in the ring. I was always moving. I was always on the go. I was always doing something. I was either throwing a punch, I was blocking, I was slipping, I was faking, I was fainting. I was always doing something in the ring. That's why I won 50 fights. As like every fight, I was very prepared, and you know, I just moved around and did things that, like, if you go back and you look at some of some of my fights, you know, you shake your head, you go, oh my God, yeah, I never stopped. You know, that was the big thing for me. That was why I won so many fights. That's why I was so hard to fight, because I never stopped moving. Yeah, I never stopped moving.
That's a very good point. You know, I was watching a lot of video in the last 3 or 4 days before we did this interview. And it's funny you're saying that, because it was your activity, not with just your hands, but your legs as well, the angles you were constantly giving people, and the fact that you were throwing a wide variety of punches. It was just a lot of activity for them to have to deal with.
Yeah, and I always I mix it up. Boom, jab, jab. Boom, I throw an overhand right. Boom, I lead off with an uppercut. Boom, I throw a left hook. You never knew what I was gonna do, and you know, it worked real well for me. Everybody, for the most part, you know, I won 50 out of 60 fights. In 5 of those fights, I could have won. You know, I had problems with weight and everything else. And you know, I lost to all world champion fighters. So obviously my style was pretty good, pretty different.
Yeah, it was that indeed. When you look at boxing today, who are some of the fighters that you get a kick out of seeing? Some of the boxers you look at and say, "Wow, I like that."
You know, I actually enjoyed the Floyd thing. You know, I kind of liked it, because I know Floyd. He's a good guy, and you know, I was glad to see him get to that 50 and then split. But another guy that I really like, and that I'm so pissed off at that he lost, Deontay Wilder. Great guy.
Yeah. Do you think that at age 34, does he need to change things, or is it just a matter of him refocusing and getting back into the next phase?
It's going to be refocusing, but he's only going to win. He's only going to beat this big guy. He's only going to beat Tyson Fury if he does what Tyson Fury's doing. That's the only way he's going to do it, which means he's got to take some steroids, and he's got to do some growth hormone, because that's exactly what that guy was on. And I don't give a shit what anybody says. That's a fact, Jack. And you just cannot.
Why do you think that's true? You just feel it?
Oh my God. Al, he does drugs his whole life. You know, this is going to make him a better boxer. It's going to make him a tougher, stronger. And you know, of course he's going to take that stuff. He was hanging out with some bodybuilders that I know that are very high-end bodybuilders. You know, he was hanging out with them at the fights. So I mean, it's a no-brainer. And you know, I literally even tried to get in touch with Deontay after the fight and to tell him, you know, I'm still waiting on his call, or I want to try to talk to some of his people, because he's not going to win against that guy when that guy's jacked up the way he is. It's almost impossible. It's a good guy, a good fighter, Tyson Fury, good fighter, Deontay Wilder, good fighter. But now, when you add in all that stuff, you add in all those growth hormones. Oh my God, he was a beast. You know, he felt like a king. He came in on a throne. That goes to show you, like, he felt like a king. When you take that stuff, I've never done growth hormone. I've been friends with plenty of guys who did it, and told me that, Vinny, it's unbelievable. It regrows your body. You feel like a monster. You feel great. Every muscle is added to the muscle that you already have. I got guys that, do it religiously, and I can see the difference in their body and their emotions and their movement and their thought process. And
so do you feel that somehow he masked it for the test that he took? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Oh my God, yes. And they even said something about it after. Like, there was something said about it that Tyson Fury didn't want to do the test. Something's not right there.
Okay. Well, you are never shy in giving your opinion about things. That's for sure. So
yeah,
we'll have to mark that one down. You are in your post-boxing time. People have kind of looked back, I think, at your journey and realized just how remarkable that comeback was. At the time of the comeback, I always have, and I've never asked you about this, I almost kind of felt that at the time, people didn't quite give that story its due. And I'm not sure the exact reason why they didn't. Did you sense that it wasn't quite as dramatically told when you came back from the injury, and how extraordinary it was? There was coverage of it, certainly, but it didn't seem like the story got its just due.
Al, you're a smart mofo, Al.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's a total compliment. You're a sharp guy, but you're a smart motherfucker.
Why do you think that was the case if it did happen?
Just because of the people that I was with, the people who were around me. Okay. It's funny you say that. I have the greatest PR girl. She's actually my hot.
Great job.
Yeah, I think you even know she's Zena. And
yes, excellent, lovely lady.
Oh, she's the bomb. She's the best. I love her to death.
Yeah, very competent and very good.
I'd take a bullet for that girl all day. But we were talking about it just the other day. Like, Vinnie, she said to me, "No, Vinnie, I'm not liking like how some of these things are going. They're not giving you the respect, and you're not getting like what you should get from that comeback." And that's whatever. I don't. Al, I'm easy go, easy come. I really don't even give a shit. But
now, do you think at the time you're a very you're a very emotional, you were a very flamboyant figure? Do you think that part of the reason at the time it wasn't seen as a feel-good story is because you were somebody that would speak their mind and would be sometimes antagonistic?
Yeah, that's definitely some of it. Definitely some of it. And you got your ups and downs in life, and you just got to go with it. And
yeah, I have yet to meet the person that did everything perfect in life.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if that person exists.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, probably not. Vinnie, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me and share your thoughts with boxing fans. I know you have so many fans around the world that enjoy you. I have always enjoyed knowing you, and you referenced your mom. I think about her every time, when you were at the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, and Dana White got up and gave you an award, and you were all reminiscing about your mom. It was just a charming moment.
That's cool. That's so nice of you to say. and she loved boxing. She loved you. She was nervous as hell. She never watched one of my fights. But when I won, the 50 fights that I won, she watched maybe like 200-300 times a piece.
Yeah. No, that's pretty amazing. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me here.
Awesome, Al. We'll do it again too. We'll do it again
when
the documentary comes out. When a documentary comes out, it'll be on one of the big networks. We'll do something.
Yeah, I want to be able to promote that for you and talk about it. So definitely we'll get you back on here to talk about that.
You the bomb, man. Stay strong.
Take care. So that was my conversation with Vinnie Pazienza. as you saw, Vinnie is not shy about speaking his mind and offering his opinions on what's going on in the world of boxing.
He is a classic, I should say. I was going to say class act, which he is 99% of the time. But those were fun comments. And when you're doing an interview like that and you get something controversial, does a little bell go off in your head saying this is going to be good?
Yeah, I'm not geared that way so much, but that was an interesting take. I'm not one that goes in that direction, and I hasten to point out that those are Vinnie's opinions, and what is it? What's that line? They do not necessarily reflect management's opinion. But it's the way he feels. And while there are, clearly in Tyson Fury's case, he had to pass drug tests, and he's suggesting that somehow he was masking. That's his viewpoint, and he's happy to present it. And that's the thing about Vinnie. He has opinions, and he is not afraid to state them for sure. Well, I sometimes have opinions, and the way I state them is from questions. And I know we have one more question on.
We do. And speaking of a guy who's rather large, Sebastian Fundora, Wayne Turner writes in, is he a freak show or is he legit? And at 6'5", he's a big guy.
He is, and what makes that the most amazing thing is at 6'5", he participates in a 154-pound division. So that's amazing. And what makes it even more amazing is he makes that weight comfortably. So he just comes off a win. He's going to be fighting in December on the December 5th on the undercard of Errol Spence and Danny Garcia. And he's going to take on Jorge Cota, who is a good fighter, but one who lost to Jermell Charlo and Erickson Lubin, kind of a gatekeeper in the 154-pound division. And Fundora comes in, though, off a very big win over Nathaniel Gallimore, who fought J-Walk Williams very tough in his fight and has fought well against other folks as well. And Gallimore has never been stopped until he fought Fundora. And Fundora is, as we've pointed out, very tall for that weight division, and yet he likes to fight on the inside, which is kind of an anomaly. But he can fight on the outside as well, and he is a handful, has a fantastic uppercut, throws great combinations, and the 154-pound division is filled with great fighters, and he's going to soon be one of them. Did I mention the word great? Well, that's a word that I like to not toss around unless it's applicable, and it is applicable to our next guest. Tim Ryan was the voice of boxing on CBS for many, many years, working alongside my friend and mentor, Gil Clancy. I mentioned that Tim was extraordinary as a boxing announcer with over 300 championship fights. To his credit, and he and Gil, in my opinion, are kind of the gold standard for a two-man booth in the sport of boxing. And Tim is a very eclectic and erudite man, and you'll get a sense of that as we talk to Tim Ryan. Tim, you have had of course, a varied career in which you've done so many different sports. But one of the things that you are known for is your great work in boxing, with especially with Gil Clancy as your partner for most of the shows that you did. And the boxing experience, I'm guessing, was different than the other sports you did.
Well, yes, in a lot of ways. It was, I think, because at that time of my career, Al, as you well know, I'm older than you are, so you may not remember all of it. But when you think when boxing came back to network television for the first time in color, really, because previously, the Friday night fights were in black and white.
Right.
And what led to that resurgence on television was the success of the U.S. Olympic team. in would have been 76 roughly.
76, yeah, right.
And so you had, Sugar Ray Leonard and Howard Davis and the Spinks brothers as a great team. And that brought a spark of interest just at the time that sports were starting to be covered from overseas live back into the US. So it was during my CBS life, which was about 20 years or so, that CBS kind of thought that was an opportunity to jump into boxing. And, I was obviously one of the people who benefited from that because I was just picked to do it, having done some radio for Mutual Radio Network boxing, and already contracted at CBS. I was kind of the only and logical guy to start covering boxing on television. So I'd actually done a couple of fights at NBC in my first go around at NBC, again because of that same timing. It would have been 76, 77, right after that US Olympic team coming out. And we did a couple of fights in Paris, as I recall, which was a nice way to start.
Yeah, not too bad.
And then when I moved over to CBS in 77, things were really starting to move there. And they had made an arrangement with promoter Bob Arum, our mutual friend, and he was connected to some promoters in Europe. And that's the time then we started to see a lot of boxing on American television.
And your original pairing on CBS included, if I'm remembering correctly, both Gil Clancy and Angelo Dundee, two of the legendary figures in the sport of boxing. And then it would pair down to you and Gil Clancy. And the two of you, were an iconic duo doing boxing. Did you feel the chemistry that you and Gil had right from the get-go?
Well, not immediately. He was 20 years older than I was, for one thing, and I didn't know how much we had in common in just life and lifestyle. But we quickly, maybe it's part of sharing an Irish heritage, I'm not sure, but kind of quickly, our bond really became a genuine friendship. And I was very honored when he died at age 88 to be asked to deliver the eulogy at the funeral. And we had become very close friends. And that length of time to be working with the same person was unmatched, I guess, among any sports commentators.
Yeah.
Sport. As you mentioned, I covered a lot of things, NFL football and basketball and hockey and Olympic sports and so on. And I had many, many great analysts working with me, but none with that kind of tenure that I had with Gil. I feel very grateful for that.
Yeah, with the two of you, I remember on a couple of pay-per-views sitting in with the two of you, and I felt a little bit like if I was tapping Fred Astaire on the shoulder, if I was going to talk, tapping Fred Astaire on the shoulder and asking if I could kind of dance with Ginger Rogers for a second. I felt maybe I shouldn't be here, even though you guys are very gracious.
We were always happy when you were around, Al. I mean, that's a good point. And the thing is that, you get asked, as you do in this business, who's the best at this and the best at that and so on. It's an opinion that I don't mind saying, and people say, you're prejudiced because you worked with them for so long. But I don't think anybody before or since has really matched Gil's ability to see both fighters at the same time.
Yeah.
Other analysts tend to focus on one or the other and tell you what he's doing well and what he's not doing well. And all those years of being a trainer for Gil gave him that special perspective that he was able to see the fight from both sides. And I think that's why the viewer was so lucky to have him describing what was going on and why.
Yeah, he was a savant. There's no question about that. And during that period, you did over 300 championship fights. And not only in the 70s, moving into the 80s, of course, which was, in my opinion, one of the great decades in boxing. And Gil told me once that he thought it was one of the great decades ever in boxing. And of course, as you point out, he had seen many of the decades previous to that. Those memories, you did, great fights involving people like Alexis Arguello and all the great light heavyweights. You did a lot of the great light heavyweight fights of that era, and that light heavyweight division was one of the best ever.
Well, it was. I think the light heavyweights and the run with the lightweights, they weren't totally concurrent. But you mentioned there was a decade of the 80s and actually into the early 90s that we continued. But when you think back about some of those names, certainly among the light heavyweights, Marvin Camel, Yaki Lopez, Eddie Gregory, there were a lot of really solid light heavyweights. Many of them became champions, and we got to cover them. The lightweight division probably even had a little more pop for the audience because you had some really colorful guys like Hector Camacho, may he rest in
Right.
and of course the elegant Alexis Arguello and the scrappy Boom Boom Mancini, and there was a contrast in the personalities and the styles that fans would line up behind one or the other, enjoying, oh, that's my guy kind of thing, and that added a lot to I think that era, and that was kind of mid to late 80s, and we were lucky to have that amount of talent that we could put on literally every weekend.
Yeah, and you got to tell stories. You were one of the major chroniclers of the Ray Mancini story, which was people forget, it was kind of a condensed story because his real fame was for about a 2-year period, 2.5-year period. He condensed so much in that time, trying to win a title from Arguello, the tragedy with Dooku Kim, winning a world title. And you were there for almost all of it. That had to be a pretty remarkable story to be able to chronicle.
Well, he had a family that was kind of like right out of the movies. They were just a real typical American Italian family, working class people from Warren, Ohio. And the first fight that we did, I think it was the first time that we actually had him on television, was in Warren. And a lot of people would say right away, well, where's Warren, Ohio? That was the first thing. But because he was such a huge fan favorite there, and the crowds came out to see him and support him, it was kind of like a folk tale, and he was kind of a folk hero. And so that was the beginning of the rest of the boxing public finding this kind of great American Italian story. And he was such a likable guy. I mean, he was very genuine. He didn't put it on for show. That was just Boom Boom, and still is. Ray Mancini is just a great guy. And, so for us to be able to follow his career and in effect be there knowing as each fight was coming up that we'd be covering it on CBS, and it was the CBS era, that, Ray was going to give us a good show every time and the fans were going to love it.
And you actually kind of, one of your early forays into boxing was doing the radio broadcast of the Ali Frazier fight. That had to be a fascinating experience. And you were not at that time yet, I don't think, super experienced at doing boxing. Just being there and the enormity of that event had to be special.
Oh, yeah. And, I did write about that extensively in my book because it was a pretty memorable thing and just a stroke of luck that I was there. I try to give you the short version of the story of how it happened, but I had been doing a few fights on Mutual Radio. And Jack Price was a man who ran the broadcast division at Madison Square Garden at the time. And he tipped me off that there was an issue when the Ali Frazier fight had been booked into at the Garden in New York, that the television rights that were owned by Jerry Perencio, who was a big cable TV guy, and Jack Kent Cooke, they went on years later to own a number of sports franchises and so on. That what they had not gotten done was to make sure that the World Heavyweight Championship radio feed was going to the Armed Forces Network, which was a tradition of many decades in the U.S. And at the last minute, they realized that that was the case, and they had some pay-per-view screenings at some Army bases. So they kind of thought they had that covered. That created an instant controversy just a few days before the fight. So they were in effect pressured by a story in the New York Times to make sure that the fight broadcast was delivered to the Armed Forces Network. Well, they had to set that up quickly. There was no announcers assigned, and it turned out because I had been hired at the last minute by the New Zealand Radio Broadcasting Network to be their announcer because they couldn't afford to send one from New Zealand to New York. So, and I looked up and down when I got there at the end of this long story. I'm sorry, but there was a row of radio announcers from all around the world, but I was the only English-speaking one. And they wouldn't take the TV feed, of course. That was Don Dunphy as the play-by-play. And so it came to me, they said, well, we need somebody to allow the feed to go to the Armed Forces Network could we take your feed that's going to New Zealand? And they don't have any money, the Armed Forces Network. I said, are you kidding me? I wouldn't take a nickel from the Armed Forces Radio Network. I am thrilled and honored to have my voice go out and call a heavyweight championship fight. So that's how it occurred, and I remember it all to this day. You make the point about the garden itself and what a spectacle it was. You know, I said there was every kind of person dressed in every kind of way, men and women, in that building, all of the celebrities and so on. It's unmatched even now in terms of how huge that fight was.
Amazing. That's an amazing story. Your book, which is called On Someone Else's Nickel, A Life in Sports and Travel, was a fascinating read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And you put an emphasis, even in the title, on the travel part. And I thought one of the things that was really charming about the book and made it even more interesting to me was that you put such an emphasis on the fact that you were allowed to explore the world while you did these sportscasts, and you really made it kind of a very fun travel book in a way.
Well, that wasn't quite the intention, but it was close to it. I think what I was trying to say was that I certainly appreciated the fact that I had that opportunity to travel the world literally on someone else's nickel, being paid to go and cover all of these events. I mean, that was kind of a cheeky title, and I'm sure some people thought exactly that. But the point that I was making in the book itself was that, you know, I was interested in a lot of other things besides covering the sport. And other memoirs by colleagues of mine in the sports television business were properly so about their careers and what they got to cover and who won and who played the best game and so on and so forth. And I felt, well, that's not what I'm thinking about when I look back on my life in sports television. It's the places I got to see, the people I got to meet, the cultures I learned about, the food and wine, the whole experience. It was like a grad school, you know, of world culture. And I looked and cherished that opportunity every time we got to go to a new place, and we did literally cover the world. I think the only major countries that we didn't get to were India and Russia. I think we touched down on virtually every other you know, civilized country in the world.
Well, and you did 10 Olympic Games, which, you know, that alone creates an international flavor to it. One of the things places you went to, and you did boxing there, you may have done some tennis as well, during a period that was of great importance to that country, was South Africa. How was that experience in going there, especially at the time you went there?
It was absolutely terrific, and there were a couple of reasons for it, Al. One was that I'd always wanted to have this vision of a Hemingway-esque safari trip. I always wanted to go to Africa and go on safari. And when we booked it was a Bob Arum fight to go to South Africa, I was really excited, knowing if there was any way I could somehow get a little piece of a safari, I would try to do that. In that first trip, that just didn't happen. We were too busy with the schedule of prepping for the fight and so on, which was in a small town that was in one of the so-called homelands at that point. And the local promoter there, Saul Kersner, who was at that point was a businessman in other ventures, but was a real boxing fan. He had boxed some as an amateur, but he had opened a small casino in this homeland of Bophuthatswana. And it was John Tate, as I recall, a heavyweight champion at the time, against a South African cop, Kali Kanutsa. And I was really interested to see, is this going to be a mixed audience? Will it be all white or all black? Obviously, we had a black American and a white South African policeman. And so I was really thrilled just with the notion of seeing what this was going to be like in this country that I only had read about and had followed the whole story of apartheid. Well, that went very well, that fight. And Tate won rather easily. And it gave Kersner and Arum a chance to then, within a year or two, Kersner had opened the big Sun City Resort outside of Johannesburg, and we had a mixed crowd there, which Aaron was properly very proud of. That blacks and whites were sitting together, which was totally rare for anything like a sports event going on in South Africa at the time. So I saw it as an historic occasion that I got an education in. A CBS News reporter who was just kind of helping us out with the production offered to, well, at my request, to drive me into Soweto. And there were all kinds of restrictions. You were not just able to jump in your rental car and drive in there. The white police at that time of apartheid controlled everything. So without going into all of the details of that, again, it was part of a life experience and a life education that I was eager for. And gratefully, we got a chance to go back there for a second fight with Weaver and Jerry Kutsia at Sun City. So, and another fight in Joburg. So I really kind of fell in love with Africa. Still have a great relationship with friends there because I got involved with a wildlife action group based in the U.S. and we went back there for many years, my late wife and I, as part of an effort to help with conservation there.
Yeah, you write about it beautifully in your book, and I urge everyone to get a copy of the book. You will hear more stories or read more stories like the one Tim just told you. Your connection with boxing has created now the fact that you're on the ballot of the Boxing Hall of Fame. And while I never talk about who I vote for publicly, I never do it and have not done it. I am going to break my rule and say right now that I proudly voted for Tim Ryan. and it would be appropriate and richly deserved for you to go in alongside with who is already in the Hall of Fame, of course, your cohort, Gil Clancy.
Well, that's very kind of you. I was there with Gil when he was inducted and went to Canastota for the ceremony, and I was so proud of him and happy for him. It meant a lot to him. His whole life was in boxing, and he certainly was deserving. And you know, I imagine most of the voters are going to be too young to even remember me, frankly. But
I think your fame will precede you to them.
That would be very nice, very nice. If it happens, I'll have to prepare a martini for Gil when we're both in the great beyond. He was a religious, very, 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 3 very dry martini before every meal we had on the road.
People that don't know Gil, he was a raconteur. You know, people might look at him from the outside and say, oh, this gruff boxing, trainer. But he was an eclectic man who was knowledgeable about many different topics.
Absolutely, Irish culture for one of them, and we got to cover, of course, Barry McGuigan in Belfast twice, and made a trip to Ireland. I call that chapter, Two Mixed Visit the Old Sod, and we really had a terrific time. Again, a chance to learn, in this case, more about our Irish heritage, and it was a very exciting time. And Gil was totally into all of that, and he had political opinions. He was somebody who had a greater grasp of the world than just the sport that he was involved in. He'd been a teacher and a coach early in his life, and he loved working with young people, and he had a big family, 7 kids, so he had to work with a lot of young people over his family years. And he was a very fun guy to be around. He was intellectually challenging, and we had great arguments, and people used to think, God, those guys don't get along very well. It was all an act that we had with each other.
Yeah. Well, you two are great together for sure. Before I let you go, I want to ask you a simple question that it's not simple, and it's actually broader than being very specific maybe, but I want to know your philosophy on broadcasting. I'm, one of the topics that, obviously fascinates me to no end is how different broadcasters approach their craft. What's your overarching philosophy on being a play-by-play announcer in the world of sports?
Well, I'm happy to answer that question because I do have feelings about it that I applied in all of my years, almost 52 years in the business, and covering so many different sports, which meant that I was working with different analysts, obviously each time, a football player or basketball coach, and crazy Al McGuire. In that case, we had many great years together, and a number of former NFL players that became TV analysts. And I always felt, and still do, that the goal, the job of the play-by-play guy is to make sure you've got all of the information that you require to prepare for the event, and then make sure that you give your expert, who the fans really want to hear from, give him all of the opportunity, in some cases the lead-ins, to show and tell what he knows about the sport, whatever it is. And that, working with Gil would be the best example of that. But I applied it to all of the people that I work with. A lot of the play-by-play guys, I think, talk too much, and they don't give their analysts the opportunity to get in and out with the time frames of the various sports. Some, those opportunities are very short, some are longer. And I really believe that the play-by-play guy is there to just help the fans know who the numbers are, who's out there, what happened on that play, and then find out the why from the analyst sitting next to you.
You framed the event as well as anyone that's ever done this, and your explanation just now kind of demonstrates what your mission statement was. And over the years, nobody has done it better than you, Tim. And I'm always happy to share with people that as a consumer of boxing, not as necessarily even as a broadcaster, my favorite listen of all time was you and Gil Clancy. And of course, I loved you in all your other sports as well. But that's my favorite listen for a boxing match. And I know the next time I see you, I will be talking to you as a Hall of Fame inductee. So I appreciate you being with us.
Well, you're very kind, and you're certainly well deserving of being in the Boxing Hall of Fame. And I'd love to join you there, but that's up to the fans. As I said, it might be a little too late, but that's okay. My memories are in there.
Well, you're a Hall of Famer in any case. So, Tim, thank you so much. I want to remind people his book is On Someone Else's Nickel, A Life in Sports and Travel. And I assure you, you will enjoy it. It is a great read. You can get it on Amazon.com, and please avail yourself of that. Tim, thanks so much.
Thank you, Al. Great to be with you.
Well, that's why Tim Ryan was such a good listen all those years on CBS, not only doing boxing, but doing other sports as well. He's a fascinating, intelligent, and interesting man. And I enjoyed chatting with him about, the times I got to listen to him and work with him. And I meant that when I said that when I was working with him and Gil Clancy on those few occasions, I didn't even want to talk because, as I pointed out, it's like tapping Fred Astaire on the shoulder and asking if you can cut in while he's dancing with Ginger Rogers. You don't want to mess up the perfect partnership. And speaking of somebody that we've partnered with, Tom Yankello, who world-class boxing channel, which is a channel that has all kinds of great instructional videos. And more than instructional videos that enhance your understanding of the strategy of boxing. And Trippa, that's the part that I think is good about his channel. You don't have to be an amateur boxer to find it interesting.
Well, certainly, and it's really, having watched a lot of his videos now, it really has increased my love of the sport, because you just find out so much kind of inside information, and you can analyze a fight and watch it completely differently. So from that regard, it's fun.
Very good point. Of course, Tom's going to be working in the corner of Roy Jones Jr. when he goes in, I think, on November 23rd, against Mike Tyson in that match that they've put together, adding to the busy boxing calendar. Well, my thanks to Vinnie Pazienza and Tim Ryan, and of course, thanks to Tripp for his effort. Let's Do Something production folks for putting this together, and we will see you next time on Bernstein Unplugged.